I chose this game because the thumbnail reminded me of a game I got hooked on a couple of years ago called MapleStory 2, God rest its soul. It's an action-adventure game made in Unity Engine by Team Olympus, a small group of college students. It was a fairly quick download and loads quite quickly into a storybook menu with some gentle music. I tried load first to see if it would show me how many saves you could have, but it jumped straight into the game, so I went back to have a look through. There's an album option, which is where photos you take in the game are collected. Photo taking isn't a key part of the game's mechanics, it's just an option for you if you want to snapshot scenery, or enemies as they charge at you. It plays a little into the game, but it isn't crucial. There's the options menu with sound, resolution, VSync and languages including English, Japanese, Chinese, Spanish, French, German and Korean. There are of course the credits showing the creators, and then the only other option was to play. The game starts off with a drawn storybook telling you the tale. I believe the team that made this game is Korean because the text is predominantly Korean with English overlaid. Your grandfather is reminiscing about SkyIsland, but he's too old to go, so you say you'll go see it for him and take some pictures to bring back. You get some kind of small plane to fly there, but get attacked by a shadowy monster and end up crashing. Your short intro cutscene is you waking up to a sentient bush creature, which you then talk to, and it says you crashed on top of it, but that doesn't put it off being friends with you for some reason, and it says it wants to take you to its grandfather as it will know about your grandfather. It says it will lead you there and then promptly lets you take the lead until you find an enormous bush creature, which is the grandfather. He says you're a prophesized hero that will save everyone from the danger, and then hands a small child 3 huge weapons with which to save people. You try to argue it might not be you, but the big bushman knows better and insists he's never wrong. They explain that the Sky Island is in fact Sky Islands. There are 4 islands in an archipelago that make up the map. Epirus is where you start, Io is where the bush people live, Thessaly is another one, and Crete is where the danger is at currently. You get instructed to go to Io, home of the Leaf people, and find their mayor to tell you more about your enemy. To get there, you must use the most hallowed of God's own transportation methods, the slingshot. Daily commutes on the Sky Island must be a disaster. When you get there, the mayor explains that a monster called Homeros changed Crete to an icy place instead of what it should be, and that it's warping the creatures of the Sky Island to be mean, or something. It's a little vague, but boils down to, bad guy on Crete, please go fight. You hop to the next island on your transit toward the enemy, but this time you have to get electrical items to assemble the mysterious machine being known as Larissa, which through some cosmic magic materializes a completely new plane out of absolutely nowhere. I think you then use this plane to get back to Epirus to see Grandpa Bush again, but you don't actually see that happen and it disappears when you get there. When you see Grandpa, he then just teleports you to your final destination. Why couldn't he have just done that earlier, goddammit? On the last island, you get to Homeros and get invited in to fight him by his also sentient door. You go in, have the battle, and then the island goes back to normal and you get an end sequence with credits and a stroll through the now unfrozen Crete, and some gentle music. Your final page is a scorecard with the time it took you to complete the game, enemy kills, and how many bushmen you freed along the way. The story as a whole is just about enough to make the game happen. The main focus is the combat, which I'll elaborate on in a minute, but whilst there are a few holes in the Sky Island lore, and there's a large proportion of the story that's just, oh look, you're a hero now, don't ask why, have these weapons to beat this evil dude. Don't ask why he's evil, we will not elaborate. It's not the smoothest writing in the world either, but I'd likely say that's because it's not the native language of the game makers, which can be forgiven to a point, but it does read very simply. On to the combat part. As mentioned, you get given 3 weapons by Grandpa Bush, but this is a trick because you actually get 4. You have a sword, a spear, and a hammer, and if you press right mouse you also get a bow and arrow. You can quick shot with just a tap of right mouse, but if you want a stronger shot you can hold right mouse to draw back and then release. You can cycle between your weapons with the 1, 2 and 3 number keys, and the switch is pretty fast. Each weapon handles slightly differently, as you might imagine. The sword has a basic slash, the lance has a lunge attack which carries you over a bit of distance, and the hammer is a heavier swing. You also have a Q special attack which is a spin regardless of which weapon you're holding. The more enemies you beat or time you spend transiting, the charge bar for your special attack fills up. The more full it is, the longer you can use the spin for when you deploy it. As you go through, there are 2 wells in the levels which upgrade your weapons. These make them more powerful as you get later in the game and changes the attacks slightly, making your first 3 attacks with the weapon the better leveled ones, but then reverting to the base attack. This is a feature I quite like in the game, because if you use the same weapon for a long time, after the first few hits it then drops in power and becomes less effective. This encourages you to switch between all 3 weapons actively during combat to maximise your damage. You can see which weapons are charged for stronger attacks, because they glow pink when you select them, and when the charge runs out they go blue. This keeps the combat more active and adds a layer of planning to the game, as you want to select the best weapon at each time, and have to work around which weapon will be charged so you can position yourself to attack from the best angle. The enemy selection isn't too vast. It starts off as little bush boars that leap at you, then moves to flying bugs that shoot things at you, then plants that bite at you like piranha plants, and big golem-like things that slam attack you and swipe at you. Each of them takes at least a few hits to kill, with the golems resisting damage from most of your weapons other than the hammer, and you get them in groups, so again there's an element of choosing which enemies are priority to kill to keep yourself alive. You have 5 hearts in total. Some attacks take 1 heart damage, such as the golem heavy attacks, and some take half a heart. I struggled a bit with keeping my hearts intact on my first run, but that's because I forgot about one of the mechanics. Included in the tutorial along with the movement controls and the attack controls is the fact that there's a dash mechanic, which can be used to dodge attacks in combat. This helps drastically with groups of enemies, but I forgot it was there at first, so I got a bit stomped on. You can heal from chests that are scattered around the levels. In these chests there are bush people to save. You can get health, and you can get some charge for your special attack meter. There aren't a ton though, so you have to be somewhat cautious. The final boss seems to be where the most combat effort has been put in. It's a 3-stage fight. The boss starts with a swipe attack and a flying charge attack for short and long range. The flying charge attack drags you to a side of the map and continuously damages you for as long as you're trapped by it. So it can be a pretty dangerous one, but you get plenty of time to dodge at first. After beating the first stage, you get to ride the enemy and bonk him on the skull until he knocks you off. This time he gets the power to make whirlwinds on the arena that cut your space, on top of his normal attacks. He also speeds up slightly to reduce your dodge and attacking time. You get another bonk opportunity, and on his last life he gets the power to launch snowballs at you, and increases in speed once again. He's a lot harder to hit because he spends most of his time charging the map, but your lunge and bow and arrow still give you a chance to land a hit over the range, even if weaker. As a core part of the game, the combat is pretty solid. Satisfying, versatile enough to stay interesting, and the final boss's difficulty at least lives up to the story in the game. There aren't any mechanic issues, and it's quite enjoyable once you get the hang of dashing and switching weapons. There are also minor platforming mechanics such as switches for bridges and moving platforms and bouncy flowers, but there's not really any skill needed in the platforming part. However, there is one big flaw in the game, which I found when I got to the second island. Io is the island of Lag, city of the bush people, where by executive decree thou shalt not run at more than 6 frames per second. From the second I stepped there to the second I got to go to the next island, I was plagued by lag. If I had to guess, I would say that the problem is these moving platforms. The reason I say this is because when you get to the next island, you're safe from the lag, until you get to an area with moving platforms again. Methinks the game might be unable to hold the weight of its own mechanics. It's either that or the sheer amount of lights and details in the Bushman village is too much for the game to process. It really breaks the flow of the game and can be quite painful to suffer through that much jittering for an entire level, especially when that particular island is the one with the most amount of things to explore on it. In general, the visuals are very well done. Colourful, creative, with the little Bushman town and each of them having different designs. The camera mode is a funky touch, letting you get pictures from first person of any area you want, including taking an insult photo of the boss after you beat it. The music is nice, calm at times but fitting for the combat, and the animations and sound effects are good too, bar maybe your character's scarf, which can't seem to decide what direction to be in. It took me about an hour to play through, though it would probably be shorter with some spare frames to add to a level or two. The story is passable, the visuals are nice, the mechanics are good and comfortable, but it serves its cake with a nice dollop of fun lag time. It wasn't a bad experience, and the world is nicely designed, and some effort's been put into the characters, but there's not too much investment in it as a whole for me, and the lag is a bit of a pain. So I'll give Sky Island a 6 out of 10.